Alright, picked out some colors, and maybe it's odd, but they're inspired by an eggplant. So, I don't think I have anything that's quite the depth of purple yet, but I'll probably grab it here in a bit. I'm going to start out by swatching things on this extra sheet, just so I know what I have. So this is a Copic E71. This is my Blick Studio Walnut. And I'm going to pause the video while I get all my swatches done. Alright, so I at least have most of my lightest colors and my mid-tones swatched out here. I'm going to use them as a reference. They're going to be off to the side. So I think what I'm going to start with is my Prismacolor Spearmint. And I'm going to start with her top. That's what I want to be this green color. And I'm centering my paper so that my figure is centered a little bit more down. I like to do that so that if I have a collection name or something like that, I can put it up at the top. The other thing that I might do is to center more in the lower right hand quadrant, so I could put information here. Or I will put it over here for information to be here. Information like swatches, cutting notes, things like that. I like to leave a little bit of extra space to finish that out. And since this might be a design I would want to make for myself, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in, and for my whole top, I'm going to put in this spearmint. This is going to be my lightest color. So I'm not going to have any white shine here. Any reflected light will be in the spearmint. Okay, got to be careful not to move it around too much. You could use a little piece of double-sided tape or something to hold everything down. I like to live life on the wild side, so I'm just risky. Alright. So I've got my major areas filled in there. And then I'm going to come in, and on the bottom, I'm going to end up having a couple colors built up. I'm going to start with my Copic E71. I have this fabric that is like this aubergine color. It's a suiting fabric, so it's not made to be super brightly colored, but it has this like beautiful little window pane, and I want to render that in. The window pane is in a lighter kind of, I don't know, it's kind of this color, so like a little bit of a ecru. And I'm just trying to render in everything that's not my hand here. I think I went a little far, so I might have to render in a shadow to make up for that. Okay. Over here, I'll go around my arm and through. Using that fencing, trying not to be too exact where things line up so that I can blend it in easier. Although this will all get covered when I go in and do the window pane design. So my lightest colors rendered in here. Then I'm going to render in my skin tone. My skin tone is in the Copic E01. Just kind of like this nice light pinkish color. similar to my skin tone. Okay. And then I'm going to come in and render in my hands. And this is where I'm going to take extra attention to where I've placed things like my fingers and building out this hand. There we go. So since I have that hand built out, I could now just bring in the fingers as lines, and I'll be able to come back in and add in some details and things like that to make the hand appear just a little bit more realistic. But you can get by with a really sketchy hand when you're coming back in if you use it as kind of a skeleton for your drawing. Alright. And here I'm going to come in, and I am not even going to worry about like eyes and stuff right now. I'm going to come in and get that in with like a gel pen or something. I'm just going to get in the main block of the head here. And then the legs. I'm thinking about the shoes and what I want to do with the shoes. So I might bring things in maybe just to the ankles. And think about what I want to do shoe-wise while I finish up the rest of my drawing. I think I know what I want to do, but I want a little bit of time. Okay. So what's going to happen now is if I come over these hands, I'm going to blend them into the skin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to come in around my fingers and if I go in straight over top of them, they'll get darker than my leg. And I actually want my leg to be a little darker than my fingers. So I could have waited, but I wasn't thinking about my legs then. Okay. Alright. Let's get in a suggestion of the hair. I'm going to go with this Blick Studio Walnut for the lightest parts of the hair. So that's going to come across here. And then we're just going to render in the overall shape. I don't want to cover up my straps on both sides. I want that garment detail to remain visible. I'm not going to sacrifice that for like a cool hairstyle. Okay. Bringing this in. Around that suggestion of an ear. Maybe even a little bit in front of it. There as well. Okay. I can do a tiny bit of a brow. And a little bit of an eye. I'll probably come in maybe with a gel pen or something, or a color pencil for detail. More likely. Alright. Now I want to use the Prismacolor Flagstone to build up some areas on the shorts for shadow. Remember that as we go on throughout whether or not we are drawing in marker, color pencil, watercolor, we want to remember the principles that we figured out in graphite of adding light and shadow. The difference is now that there's color. So I have my lightest tone. I've already built up some shadow along here, and I'm going to need some to cover what went on with this pocket. So I'm going to bring some right underneath this arm reaching forward, and then along the bottom of the pocket and along the crease of the hemline. And I might want to come back in and touch this up, or I could just shadow it. That. Then definitely where I'm going to see shadow is where this fabric overlaps. Bring it down like this. We have a waistband here. Some nice rouging. Some lines that come through here describing that paper band bag. Oh, I brought them in a little bit too far. I think I can smooth it back out into just this panel though. And that should be fine because it's sitting underneath the bust here. So it would be a little bit in shadow anyway. I'm going to leave some light for the button. And then I am going to start mapping in some of my window painting. So I'm going to come in with my shadow, and I'm going to start making these little boxes and leaving a little bit of light between them. This doesn't have to get painfully exact. I think I've said before that my personal standard is if I had a box of swatches that I sent off with my drawings, could you pick out the correct fabric based off of what I've given you in my drawings? Or even better, could a child pick it out? Ideally, your person who's doing your sewing is like also a trained professional, but you don't know. It's always better to be safe than sorry. And render it in so that at least you can be like, it's pretty obviously that fabric, if they send everything back wrong. Also, you could just clip a sample of your fabric to your drawing. Which is what I do for myself, so that if I figure out what I want to do with the fabric, and then years later actually get to doing it, we all know how it goes, then at least I can remember that. Okay. And I just remembered that I'm causing myself a great deal of headache using that brush end when I have this tiny, beautiful, exact end. When we get to watercolor, I'll tell you about using brushes that are different sizes based off of this area you're trying to cover. And forgetting to do that is a common condition that I call one brush-itis, where you forget that all other brushes exist. It's very easy to contract. Requires constant effort to avoid. Until you train yourself to start looking at a spot and picking the best tool for it. Or until you get one brush that can do it all. I need to get less precious about this. Because I'm going to have to do this all again in a darker color. Or at least some of it. Okay. Well, that's half the shorts done. Only like 5 minutes to do that. Markers can be fast if you're not rendering in tiny little patterns. But tiny little patterns are never fast to render in. We're getting there, slowly but surely. This is why people have music in their videos. Otherwise you have to talk the whole time. Alright, cool. Base layers. Shorts, done. Window pane fabric, starting to look like what it's going to end up being. I need to grab this Winsor Newton, let's see. Let's start actually with the Copic YG95, and then we'll use the Winsor Newton Moss, which is just a touch darker. I'm going to render in these little kind of darts that come in, the like crinkles from tucking it. And one thing with these markers is the chisel tip, you can use just the fine point of it to get a really fine line as opposed to your thick line if you're using the whole chisel. So I'm going to come also under the bust, and then I think here in between, and then there's some like channels in here that I want to render in as though it's a slightly like satiny fabric. So I'm rendering the low points of those channels in here. And sometimes I just like to break up the line a little bit. If I'm doing a specialized treatment to the fabric, and especially if I was sending this to someone else, I would either write like the name of the treatment on my piece, or I might even take a little sample of the fabric and just do like a little example of the cording that I'm thinking of, so that they have something to pick apart. All right. Then I'm going to, I want this eventually to be like quite a bit darker. So I'm going to beef this up just a little bit, just leaving the white that I want to stay shiny. All right. Get a few more layers, get a little bit of shine at the, where it like blossoms out a bit, a little bit of shine up on those straps. And now I'm going to come in with this Winsor Newton moss to add even more shading in. Okay. Maybe it's time I think about these shoes. What I think I want to do is kind of I'm thinking of somewhere between like a mule-esque flat and like a little strappy sandal. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go in between. I'll do a nice little strap here at the ankle, and then we can have a sandal back, the toe, here. Get under in the foot. Keep taking off the thing on the end. Okay. Let's render in the foot here. Maybe a bottom. Okay, I need to go find my second layer. Alright, first and second layers down. Maybe a few more to go. One thing that I'm going to do before I go any further is I'm going to take this Copic E71 and darken some of like my shadows on the body. It's maybe like a touch much, but I could always like adjust the lighting a bit so that it's not incredibly overdone. because I want to get just some of this shaded area rendered in. Right under the chin. I think once I darken everything else up, it won't be so wild to have put something this dark in. Otherwise, I can play with the stylization of it. There's a kind of old art joke, which is that style are just the mistakes you make over and over again. Okay. I'm going to kind of swatch these out as I go, because I didn't take my break to swatch them. Ooh, that is minty. But I think I like, it's going to shift my green just a little bit cooler, which I like. So this was the Winsor Newton Chromark, and this is Marsh Green. Let's put some of the Spanish olive back in now. There we go. I like that top a lot more now. And let's see if this eggplant is going to do the trick. I think it will. Unfortunately, I don't have my little square. Now I'm going to bring this in just more towards the areas of shadow. And kind of fleck it in. And then let's really get fine detail in here. like that. Might take a little bit more of this E71 and kind of blend it. Let's add some dark stuff to the shoe. I don't know where I'm gonna find a moss green, like, patent leather shoe, but, or maybe it's velvet. Okay. Work up in the hair a little bit here. That's not gonna be dark enough to make a difference. Alright, grabbed another brown, but also that EO1 Flamingo Pink again. We'll see what we can do as far as adding in some dimension to the hair. I also grabbed a Poppy Red because adding in another color to hair can sometimes make it pop a little bit more. We'll see if the red's too much. It's alright. Okay. I'm gonna bring in this and just add in a second layer next to this darker shadow I put in to kind of blend it. Under the face here. Okay, and now I'm gonna grab, at the end of my marker drawings, I rarely feel like they're defined enough for my taste. And so I like to go in with a micron. My actual preference is to go in with like the sepia toned one, so brown. Black works just fine, especially if you're using dark colors already. I tend to like be doing more vintage inspired pieces, and so the sepia works nicely for me. But the brown is easy, or the black is easier to find in different sizes. Okay. Starting in on the hand first. I am not really gonna like render in each individual nail or anything. I'm just giving the idea that there's something there. There's just like a small mark indicating something's going on there, but I'm not going to take the time to describe it all. This is not a hand drawing. I'm just trying to have a hand there that is not drawing attention to itself, honestly. So, my goal with my hand and my figure drawings is simply to have it not be so atrocious it's the first thing you notice. When what I'm trying to draw and have you notice is the clothing. The thing about micron is you want to keep your lines smooth and decisive. So some of my tips is if there's a place that you don't want to cross over, start there. So such as if I don't want to cross over this finger, I'm going to start at that finger and pull my line away from it. Because if I'm pulling my line up to it, I have more velocity built up that I have to stop. Okay, let's make this face nice and face-like again. One of the things I've come to like about digital drawing is the ability to kind of like infinitely zoom in to an extent. So it becomes way easier to get your tiny details in. The other answer is to draw much larger. This is also where I'm going to come back in and make sure that any of my detail is standing out enough. So anywhere I feel like I need to go back in with this fine line, I will. And then bring in the pant, any of those detail lines that might have been lost while I was rendering in the fabric. Like the placket or the stitching. Or the waistband. Finish out these shoes. Alright, and I think the last thing I want to do is grab some colored pencils, maybe give a little bit of blush, maybe add in a white highlight or two. Actually, I think I'm pretty good on that. But a little blush would be nice. Alright, get a little blush. I can just use a little pearly to add in just a little bit of color. Blend in some of those shadows. I like putting a little bit across the knuckles too to give them some definition. The knees. Elbows. Then I might decide if I want to do anything with the background. If I have like a concept I'm going for, I might play around with the background a little bit more. I'm going to do that in a different video.